I love this image because of the way the woman is kind of collapsed into his lap. You know, she's obviously very comforted by him, feels very much at peace. And Raja is rubbing some coconut oil into her hair. Raja had kind of a rough childhood. By the time he was 14, he'd left home and was living on the streets and was something of a bully and a thief. And eventually it caught up with him. Oh, he slept in coverts with dogs for warmth, and it eventually caught up with him. He ended up in prison. And while he was in prison, there was a fellow that talked to him about Jesus, and he became a Christian. And his question then, he said, was, what do I do with this? What do I do with this newfound faith that I have? Well, his parents tracked him down, found him, got him out of prison, took him back home to Bangalore, India, and he began cobbling his life together. And he became an auto rickshaw driver. That's where the auto comes from. You know, one of these tricycle type things that have a motorcycle in the front, you know, and there's a cab that you kind of squeeze into, you know. And got married and started a family. And he's riding down the street one day, and he's looking at all the broken and dying people on the streets of India. And it's horrendous, the number that there are, quite frankly. And he said to himself, Jesus said something about neighbors. Aren't these my neighbors? So he picked up one of these people, dragged her home, and began caring for her. He and his wife began caring for her until she died. And then he picked up another, and another. And at one point, he had something like 12 men that they were taking care of in their home. And now, an Indian home is maybe, you know, from here to the tape and then over to it wouldn't be much bigger than this part of the room. And one day his wife said, you know, this isn't working. Something's got to change. And so he began to develop a thing that he called Home of Hope. And takes in the people. He's kind of another Mother Teresa. Matter of fact, India has a Mother Teresa Award, and he received it one year. And while he received it, some of the people got upset about it, and he walked out of the presentation, and he was arrested and thrown in jail. And because he said, so he was asked the question, how did this start? And he says, well, it really began when I became a Christian. And there were some Hindu lawyers that didn't think it was right, and they got him out of jail again, you know. But anyway, he's had an interesting life. But this woman here this is some of the final days of her life. She's dying. Most of the people who come to Home of Hope are there transitional, but it's death with dignity and honor and comfort, rather than just lying on the street somewhere, waiting for the end. And he has something like, well, when I was with him, he had something like 450 people he was caring for. He and a staff of 30, about half of those 30 are volunteers. And now I understand he's got 800. And, you know, he raises his money among the Indian people. He doesn't look for international donations. And this child died during the night. And he is wrapping her body, getting her ready for cremation. Nobody knew her name. She was one of India's throwaway children, found on the street. Nobody claimed her. Nobody wanted her. And they brought her to Home of Hope. And she lived there about 18 months, and she died one morning of tuberculosis. The latest, at least when I was there, the latest facility he was developing was children's facility, and this is This is some of the children. Actually, they're waiting outside to escort the body of their friend onto the truck that will take or the ambulance that will take her to be cremated. Bringing people in. Sometimes mothers come in. He's taken in mothers that have children. You know, they're living on the streets with their children. This is one of them that he did that. This young woman was, he heard some noises in some bushes one day, and he went in to investigate, and he found 3 men raping her. And so he chased them off. He's a pretty big guy. Chased them off and brought her to Home of Hope, and he says that she will probably never leave, you know, that she is so damaged and so broken that she will probably never be able to function outside of the home again. She's a beautiful soul, though. Once she learned that Raja and I were friends, every time it was time for mealtime, she would come up and take my hand and make sure I went down to get something to eat. And she, "Are you hungry?" That's probably the only English word she knew. "Are you hungry?" And this, you know, the first photo, you saw him massaging the coconut oil into the woman's head. Well, every morning he's there, he sticks a couple of tubes of coconut oil in his back pocket, and he wanders around among the people, and he massages the coconut hair into their oil, her coconut oil into their hair, maybe in their arms and whatnot, because they spend a lot of time outside, even at the home. They don't spend time in the shelter. They just sleep there. Most of the time they spend it in shaded areas. Going around one morning, he found this woman, and she had a gangrenous finger. And here he's beginning treatment for that gangrenous finger. The interesting thing is the other 2 hands in there are the hands of a physician. And the physician is not doing the treatment, Raja is, because she's trained him to do some things so that, you know, that he can do them when most of the time they're not around. It's not unusual for hospitals to bring people in those final stages of their life to the home and kind of candidly kind of dump them, and that's what's happening here. This woman, you know, maybe lasted, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours before she died. This is kind of picture the streets. This is what it's like to live on the streets. This woman, you know, has all her, we've seen this around here. Oops. We've seen this around, thank you, Ryan. We've seen this around here. You know, and yet, you know, here she is. Roger kind of roams through the streets, you know, kind of checking on people, and he kind of watches for some that are really on the cusp of needing to come to Home of Hope. And you know, here this homeless woman is sharing her food with a feral dog. People sleep during the day. Bad things happen at night. You don't sleep at night. That's part of being homeless. This is Abram, and I love this guy. This is a guy that Raja keeps, or kept checking up on him, and he would say to him, "Are you ready yet? Are you ready to come?" And Abram would say, "No." He'd kind of been sort of a security guard for a couple of companies and slept in the back alley and kind of watched their back door, their stuff. But he had recently had a stroke, and you can see how he can't quite care for his beard anymore. And I suspect short time after I left that Abram joined the group at Home of Hope. This woman was on the streets for 4 days, or 3 days, before anybody thought to contact Raja and tell her about him. She just lay there. Probably had a stroke. There's a value in Indian culture that if you take care of someone like this, you're responsible for them for the rest of their lives. And so as a result of that, there's a hesitancy to get involved. And This is the father whose son has just come to him and said, Dad, there's not enough money to feed you and the children too. You have to leave. And dropped him on the streets. This is one of my favorite images. You know, the picture isn't really of the man itself, it's of the hands. And the hands belong to a guy that everybody calls Babu. And Babu was a translator in the burgeoning internet. What am I looking for? I lost the word. Internet industry in India, and he spoke something like, as I remember, 8 languages. And money was fast and quick and heavy, and he a lot of it began. He got involved in alcohol and drugs, and then that led to him losing his job and losing his family and ending up on the street and nearly dying until somebody brought him into Raj's place. And what I love about Babu is one of the few that recovered. And he went back and he's trying to put his life back together again. He's contacted his family. They don't really trust him yet, but he's working on it. But every Tuesday and Saturday, Babu comes to Home of Hope, the men's facility. And on Tuesdays, it's shaves. And on Saturdays, it's haircuts. This is a skill that he picked up so that he could give back to the place that had given him his life. Well, that's all the images I'm gonna show you. And over the years, I've had a number of people ask me why I do stories like this. They're rough to do. I'll never forget the first time. And I was a brand new editor. I was editing a magazine here in Memphis at the Baptist Brotherhood Commission on Poplar Avenue. I don't know, maybe some of you remember that. It was a layman's organization. And the purpose behind it was to involve men in ministry and missions and create opportunities for them to do that. And I was sitting in my office one day, brand new, I'm green as a gourd, and our vice president, Norman Godfrey, walks in, and he says, "Why do you do what you do?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Why do you take the pictures you take and do the stories you do?" And I said, "Well, I like it." He said, "No, that's not what I'm asking. Why do you do what you do?" And I said, "Because it's important." And he says, "Well, why do you do what you do? Not this other stuff. Why do you do it?" And I went, "Oh, gosh, I can see where this is going." And I said, so I pulled out the Baptist card. Now, those of you that aren't Baptist probably won't know this, but the Baptist card that you pull out, you say, and you lay it on the counter, and you say, "Because I'm called." And Norman goes, "Oh, good. Tomorrow night is our trustee meeting," and he says, "Why don't you do the opening devotion and talk to the trustees about your calling?" And he said, now most of our pastors most of our trustees are pastors, and they really don't like what we do. So they don't think laymen should be in charge of anything. They don't think women should be in charge of anything. They're not sure. Well, they're pretty sure that missionaries are called. They're not too sure about some of the pastors, and they're certainly suspicious of directors of music. And he said, "So, tell them about your calling, but make it good." And he walked out. And I went, crap. He has just suckered me, And it wouldn't be the first time. This was in the time that we worked together. He suckered me many times into doing things that I didn't want to do or didn't think I should do. And I never realized how significant Norman was in my life. Matter of fact, obviously, from what I've just said, ours was a somewhat tempestuous relationship. But I didn't realize how important to his life until after he was murdered. I left the Brotherhood Commission to go on, and probably 20 years later, I came back here for Brotherhood reunion. The good old boys in the convention who didn't like laymen being in charge of anything, they eventually got rid of the Brotherhood Commission. And so we were here at this reunion, and Roddy Stimson, Norman's best friend, who had been editor of the magazine I was the editor of before I came, was there, and he came up to me, and we're telling Norman stories, and we're laughing and having a good time. And then all of a sudden, Roddy got serious, and he said, "You don't know how much Norman loved you." And then that began to click with me over the weeks after that, about the things that he'd gotten me to do that I didn't want to do or didn't think I should do, and how significant and important they were in my development as a person. Well, okay, I had this devotion, and I go, I got to find a verse. Got to find a verse. And I was looking at, I was reading the Gospel of Luke at the time, so I flipped open Luke, and first thing that struck me were the initial verses in Luke, and this is a rough paraphrase, but this is what I remember. "My dear lover of God, inasmuch as others have attempted to set down a connected narrative of the things that have happened among us, I, in my turn, am attempting to do so also." And I went, whoa, that sounds like a journalist to me. That's what we do. We put together connected narratives to help people understand what is happening among them when we're at our best. Well, so maybe that's a verse. I'm flipping on through Luke, and I finish Luke, and I go over into Acts, and I'm flipping through Acts looking for something, since he'd written that too. And I get to the end of Acts, and Luke had done a strange thing for a writer. He left it open-ended. It was like he set down his pen in the middle of his writing, and he didn't wrap it into a neat bow, like we writers have a tendency to do. We have a lead, and then we have the ending, and it kind of wraps back to the lead, to give sort of a continuity to it. He didn't do that. And I suspect that Luke knew that there would be others coming behind him to continue that connected narrative. And I hope I've been one of them. I also think that here's another little aside. There's a village in northeast of Syria, in the area where Paul escaped to after his Damascus experience, called Sayedniah. In Sayedniah, there's an Orthodox church in there, and they have an icon that they purport was painted by Luke. Yeah, it's probably not, but I'd like to think it's possible. I'd like to think that Luke, would be very happy, and with people who not just write but photograph, paint, work in clay, chisel stone, anything to continue the connected narrative. Well, so anyway, I delivered my little, devotion, and nobody challenged me on it. A few folks came up and thanked me for it, but most didn't, And I don't know, it kind of, when I look back on those days, I'm kind of reminded of what John Pritzer, if you recall him, he was part of our Lenten series this past spring. And John did a strange thing too. He didn't preach from the pulpit. He walked among the congregation and preached. And his message was, all are gifted, all are called, and all are sent. Thanks. Uh-oh.
Oh, we're going to have questions.
I know this group.
Thank you, Bill. I'd love for y'all to ask questions of Bill. I'd love to know I mean, we could talk about that photograph for an hour, I feel like. I'm curious if you'd say something about where you learned this particular art form of this way of continuing a narrative or entering a narrative, however you describe it. How did that come to be?
Yeah, I'm not trained in journalism, but I'm sorry.
Make sure they can hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm really. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm not trained in journalism. I'm trained as a biologist and worked as a research biologist for a number of years before I went into journalism. And a lot of people think, well, isn't that odd? You know, science is all about observation, and journalism is all about observation. And I actually left the university. I had some books under my belt. I thought I'd become an author. And I quickly learned that paydays for authors are every 6 months when the royalties checks come in, and sometimes they aren't too hefty, you know. And maybe you can supersize your fries with them. And so I started doing some freelance writing and journalism. And I found out I really liked it. And I went, my goodness, you know, these people pay you to travel places and interview interesting people and write stories about them. And I really didn't get into photography heavily until I got here in Memphis. And the magazine that I published was editor for, was heavily photo-driven. You know, stunning photographs and crisp writing, and I kind of had the writing down, you know, but the photography, I just kind of, I found I had a knack for it, and I liked it, and I would study what other photographers do, and you know, and figure out how they did it. You know, I tried to study with some of the best, and then eventually there came a guy along, and we split the magazine up, and we divided into age groups, and his name was Jim Burton, and we doubled the subscription of the magazine by doing so. And Jim was this crack photojournalist, and he worked for some of the most visual publications in the country. And how in the world we ever got him here, I don't know. It was a calling. It really was. Yeah. And Jim began mentoring me in my photography, and I began mentoring him in his writing. And years later, you know, we're at a conference, and people would come up, and Jim and I, and chatting and whatnot, and Jim turned to me and he says, you know, he says, isn't it interesting? He says, when people talk to you, they talk to Bill the photographer, and when they talk to Jim, they talk to Jim the writer. We did a darn good job mentoring each other. Yeah.
Well, Bill.
Okay.
You're so gentle and so self-effacing and so delightful in sharing stories. Tell them about the book that you're coming out with.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it's whether it'll ever come out or not. Just started talking with literary agents and exploring literary agents and publishers, and it's a friend of mine who I worked with at the Brotherhood Commission by the name of Joe Westbury, and we've known each other for eons, and I was best man in his wedding, and anyway, we decided that we would do a manuscript together, and it would be for fun. No deadlines, and this was last fall, about this time, and we thought, you know, we'll probably finish it by March. You know, Joe wrote the final thing last August, you know, but that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to do something that was fun, and for us, you know, we'd both been creative on demand most of our careers, and this was for us. So I don't know, you know, it's called Tell Me a Story, And it's a group of memoirs. You know, Joe is very much a news writer, and I'm very much a feature writer, and yet our styles really, really match, I think, or at least some of the initial feedback we've gotten from people is how well they match. And so I don't know what will happen to it, but that's, yeah. Yeah.
Bill, you've used to employ your calling in the Baptist church,
Uh-huh.
and now you're here.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about the Episcopal Church that makes you feel at home?
Yeah. Well,
He's asking for your testimony.
yeah, that's right. Okay, here's my Episcopal card. You you retire from an institution, you retire from a position, but you don't retire from a calling. And Alex and Carrington were a big part of us coming to Calvary. We got to know them down at the farmers market and talking. And one day I walked in with a Richmond T-shirt on, and Alex goes, "I'm from Richmond," and we began talking about things that we had in common and whatnot. And that led to more conversations as the weeks went on. And then one day he mentioned church, and he said, why don't you come? And I said, okay. Why don't you be our guest? I said, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And I was at a point, I was burned out. I'd gone from being valued and appreciated in the Baptist world to being suspect and ignored, and eventually kicked to the curb with a whole lot of others. I wasn't alone. It wasn't a targeted thing, but yeah, it was. but anyway, I came in here, and I don't know, we kind of struggled with the liturgy at first, and then we found a great deal of comfort in it. The music was incredible, and we'd come in and we'd walk in and we'd say, "Oh, good, Scott's preaching today," or "Oh, good, Catherine's preaching today," or "Oh, good, Paul's preaching today." Every one of them had something to say and said it well, and it was something for both of us to bring back home with us, carry with us, and ruminate over, I guess you'd say. And then Carrington said to Alex one day, "You ought to invite Bill to Baguette Brothers." And he'd fit, so I went, and that's an incredible group of guys. I mean, we have so many different opinions on things, and some are rather conservative and others rather liberal, but nobody cares. We just, we express our opinions, everybody goes, "Yeah, I get that," we kind of go on. And it's a I don't know, it became a group that really, really nurtured me into the Episcopal Church.
Good reminder how important good food is to church. Way to go, Carrington.
That's right.
I would like to echo, I thought your description was very apt, your gentle presence. I have really valued that as we've gotten to know each other.
Thanks.
And also as a mother to a newly minted youth group member, and youth looks like sitting here, that's right, high school came today, right? What drew you to serving youth?
Youth?
Yeah, and what are you enjoying about that, and how can you lend your creative spirit towards that?
Well, one of the ways in which I was burned out is the church I was at in Richmond. It went the same way as the convention went. It became more and more conservative, to the extreme. And I'm not saying conservative is bad. I believe in the balance of having conservative and liberal thought. I mean, it's necessary for our society. But this began to be extreme. And I was working and I had worked for a number of years with a ministry to at-risk teenagers. And here we were in one of the wealthiest counties in Virginia, and had this pockets of poverty, and we'd go out and pick them up and bring them in for a Wednesday evening meal, and you'd watch some of these kids just scarf down that meal, and you knew that it was the best meal that they'd had all week, And I think we had some positive influence on them. A number of them, first person in their family ever to graduate from college. We had one that went on, got a bachelor's degree and then a master's, and she's now teaching art in Baltimore City schools. There was another that, totally withdrawn and introverted, and we kind of drew her out, and she got a full ride scholarship to Iowa State. First one in her family even graduated from high school. Now she's a Marine Corps officer, And, I used to get on the bus with her, and she'd say, "Come sit with me. Tell me a story." And she'd want to hear a story about, something I'd done overseas. And then she'd say, "Do you think I could do something like that?" And I'd say, "Yeah, Vicki, you can. So I don't know. I get more from the youth than they get from me. I'm sure. It's just for me, it's my people in some ways. And I'll never forget one night down, and when I kind of knew I was being accepted was. We were asked, I don't remember why, we were asked to change tables. So we did, And I started to get up, and somebody said to me, "Oh, you can stay here." And one of the youth said, "No, he's coming with us. He's one of us." So, yeah. Uh-oh.
No, this is a more stylistic question.
Okay.
Why'd you choose to put the photos in black and white?
Oh, okay. Yeah, good question. I'm sorry? Yeah, she asked, why did I choose to do the photography in black and white? And color is so seductive that it draws the eye right away. And India is this incredibly beautiful country, and even these images, the one of the woman, if you saw that in color, her dress and the background, the stone that was behind her, it's just stunning. It draws the eye away and it takes you away from the story. And so when you strip out the color, then your viewer is the force to look at the story itself, at the image. That's why I did it. Yeah.
I'm also thinking about the photography. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Photography. Did you know these people? I'm thinking about how close you are, or is this a lens that you're using? They're so intimate.
Mm-hmm.
Was there misgiving on the part of the subjects?
With these people, we spent a day hanging out without having ever cameras with us. And I did that a lot. The relationship, to me, establish a good relationship and the images will come. And, so, by the time we began taking those images, in some ways, they were kind of ignoring us, we were very acceptable of us. And I do work very close. I remember one time there was a couple of us standing together, and she was asking, well, how close do you guys get with these and these photos? And my friend said, well, some people, you can actually, there's one guy you can actually see, he works from 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet. He says, I have a tendency to work from 20 feet and 1 foot. And he says, Bill works from 7 inches, 9 inches, and 11 inches. Yeah, it does. I've done things like, I thought I was going to be in real trouble one time. I was doing a Native American story, and I just didn't feel comfortable photographing it. And I was hanging around. I think I was 4 days into it, and I was thinking, I can't go back home and tell people I didn't get any images, and yet I didn't feel like I was comfortable. And so I'm in a bar, with a bunch of young men, and I'd slung a camera on my shoulder, and and one of the guys turned to me and he said, "Thought you said you were a photographer." And I said, "Well, yeah, I am." And he says, "Well, when are you going to start taking pictures?" And I said, "Well, I think maybe about right now." Yeah.
What else? We got a few more minutes. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay.
One more. Will?
Bill, and forgive I guess sort of a current events question in the midst of your very personal and excellent presentation. But I'm always confused by India. I think of a very advanced economy. I used to work for a software company, and half the employees were in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And, it seems to be a rising economic environment, but there are these awful stories of poverty and rape and just, how does all that coexist? Is there any social safety net or?
Nah, so the safety net is family, basically. I mean, you have people dying on the streets. Bangalore, at any given time, has 60,000 people on the streets. Most of them, some point of transition from life to death. Not much of a middle class. Either you're incredibly wealthy or you're impoverished, and I don't know how you get beyond that, it's a country I wish I had spent more time in it. I kind of discovered it towards the end of my career, and I don't know, one of the most stunning things for me is I'd finished this story on the streets, and a videographer and I did it together. He did a video of it, and I did the stills and the writing. And, we were, just stinking the streets on us, and we checked into a guest house at a hospital, and we were going to spend a day just showering and relaxing before we flew home. And I walked up into the second floor of this apartment that we had, and I walked out on the balcony, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by a swirl of iridescent blue butterflies. And the contrast. Moments before, in something that utter despair, to that sudden transition to something just incredibly beautiful. And that's how I think of India.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah. All right.
Next week, we have another one of our own, Noah Glenn, who's also a visual storyteller. Noah is a filmmaker. He also has a podcast about this mindfulness for kids. Anyway, there are all kinds of remarkable people sitting in the pew next to you. So thanks to Catherine, she's scheduled a few of them to tell their stories to us. Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Go in peace.